Inference Plus, story short number 18, Series B. The sea is black. People only believe the sea is blue if they don't really know it, if they've never sailed far from land where it runs so deep that there is no bottom. That sea, the true sea, is blacker than the night sky. There are legions of unknown monsters hidden in that blackness, but the greatest one of all does not lurk or skulk or hide. The worst monsters float on the surface for all to see. The wooden dinghy bobbed on the waves, no bigger than the dot of a single I in the entirety of the New Testament. The paint, once crisp and white, had all peeled away under the persistence of the sun and salt and days. The oars had been lost to the water, so the little boat drifted. Oars were of little use in the face of so much vastness, but they had given the men a sense of self-determination. As long as they had the oars, they had been able to cling to the delusion that they, not the sea, would choose their fate. Without them, they had no choice but to accept that the stars, not themselves, were the drivers of their destiny. From the bottom of the boat, where their urine collected in an increasingly shallow pool, Thomas moaned. "Enough with your feckin' groanin'," Oldham snapped. "All of us feel as shite as you, and you don't see us carrying on." Thomas moaned again. He had gone away from the boat and the sun and the thirst to someplace else. Oldham could snap all he wanted. Thomas would pay him no mind. The deep, ugly gashes on Thomas's back, once angry and red, had turned black as the sea itself and emanated the putrid stink of spoiled meat. Gangrene, sepsis, likely other ailments too for which they had no names. Ultimately, the medical terms wouldn't matter once they'd thrown the husk of him overboard. There had already been whispers between Lassiter and Thompson about doing just that, but Oldham had put a stop to it. "He'll be going on his own soon enough. God sees all we do." Birrick, the youngest, kept to himself, huddled on the tiny bench in the stern, his bony knees pulled to his chest and his feet tucked tight beneath him. The boy didn't want his feet to touch the sloshing mess below. Oldham sometimes watched Birrick as he stared wide-eyed at the sea and felt a stab of sadness for everything the child would never experience. Oldham's own boy was just a year younger than Birrick. Oldham would never, ever let his boy become a sailor. Never. He'd sooner smother James while he slept than see him get on a boat. Better to meet the Lord as an innocent than to know the evil of desperate men. When Thomas's moaning ceased, the men's initial reaction was to savor the silence. The drone of his cries had been maddening, and their absence left a sweet cleanness in the air, like when a rainstorm stops and leaves the world fresh and new. It was Birrick who spoke. "What should we do with Mr. Thomas?" The childish voice startled the other three men. "Put him over, I reckon," Lassiter said flatly, "like we said before." "But what about his family?" Birrick said. His small voice was nearly smothered by the lapping of the water against the boat. "We'll keep his things and give him to his wife," Oldham said decisively, as though their rescue were an imminent thing. "I ain't doing it," Lassiter protested. "I ain't touching him. He stinks to high heaven." Thompson was ultimately the one who pried off the man's wedding band and pulled the letters from his pocket, wedging both into a gap in the wood for safekeeping. When they rolled the body into the sea, no prayers were said or memories shared, just a slow sinking until there was nothing at all. That night, Lassiter drank seawater until his stomach swelled up, like a woman pregnant with her own doom. He raved and screamed at unseen enemies. He cried in the arms of his invisible mother, and then he leapt in the water and swam away to an island that was not there. No one uttered a word as he splashed away into the dark horizon. Birrick sat still as a stone, watching it all with big child's eyes. This was the way of the sea, to pick them off one by one until none remained. Oldham and Thompson looked at one another, then at the boy still huddled on the stern. With that single look, a decision was made. Oldham felt a twinge of peremptory remorse. He closed his eyes and said a prayer for forgiveness that he knew a merciful God would never grant. God, he knew, sees all, but there are forces greater than God. With one accord, the monsters of the deep black sea advanced upon their prey.